Alrighty, congrats, you've done it. You've gotten to week 0 and now you have week 1 open. And you can see in the actual Canvas setup what I was talking about in the welcome video, which is that once you complete all those items in the previous required module, so this course is set up as modules, then the next module will open. And now you can see that in order to do the rest of the next item after the attendance, you have to have this done. Okay, so just getting used to the way this is set up. Hopefully this takes you only another week or so to get used to it. So let's go ahead now and look into the attendance. Now you've already been here. So this is what we're going to do. In attendance, and in this case, remember, attendance is 10% of your grade. It also is the way I take attendance and show the campus you have been here in the course for this week. Now, like everything, you can come in late, but it's not, of course, optimal because you're then not with the rest of the class. All right, so what are we going to do this week? Well, we're going to do some setup, and we're going to do the robot challenge. And this is just a reiteration of something I said in the welcome video, which is I don't suggest taking 28 client-server databases in this course at the same time. If you've done it, then manage your time wisely. All right, so I hinted at this next one in the welcome video. So when you submitted your username, when you submitted your welcome for the week 0, depending on when you have completed that. So the sooner in before the beginning of the semester would be optimal. But if you're doing it on the first day of the semester and you're not doing it until, let's say, early evening, just know that our schedules are most likely different. Okay, so having this submitted in week 0 is way important because the next item requires it. So once you submit your GitHub username, then I actually go into GitHub, and I'll just actually show you just so you have an idea of what this looks like. And then the course, now, so unlike your individual GitHub, right? So I showed you that in the welcome. So if I was to do github.com, Rio Waller, that is my individual space on GitHub. We are going to be using a GitHub organization, okay, which allows us to have private repos, only you and I will see, and public repos, which everyone will see. That is actually, in this case, anyone out on GitHub. These are not just public for our course organization. But in this case, you'll end up creating both of these. But in order for you to do this work, you have to be invited. And so what I do is I come in here and I actually, oh, sorry, it's actually here. I invite you, right? So I invite you in to the course. And now once I do that, then you will get an email. Okay, so that's what this was saying, is watch for this in your email. Now, if for some reason I told you, and I will actually, in my reply to your welcome, I will actually tell you you've been invited. If for some reason you didn't see the email, you can also click here to accept the invite, assuming it had been sent successfully. Okay, so just FYI. So, you must accept the invite to access the private repos required for the next step. So don't leave it pending. Way important. Okay, so what do I mean by that? And let's just back up one to see this. If I go to modules, so the next item, once you do the reply here, is you're going to set up your dev environment. And in order to do that, you have to be those repos, folders, you can think of them. And if you're not familiar, which most of you are probably not, but in this case, in order to do the work, you have to be in the GitHub organization, and therefore you have to accept the invite. Okay, now we've talked about this. So now let's talk about the actual next item, because the next item is going to walk you through how to set up your dev environment, okay? And there's going to be two options. One will be a local option to where you have everything loaded locally. So for me, this is the way I typically work. You have another option though. If you are relatively new to doing any kind of install into your desktop or having no command line experience, it doesn't require a lot. GitHub does require some command, and you'll learn the commands to actually do the version control part of this. But in this case, you can, and here's the benefit. The benefit of the cloud is that it's wherever you would have a browser, you can log into GitHub. Now, GitHub does require two-factor authentication. So, just keep that in mind. But as you move through different computers, possibly in your life, you would have that cloud-based anywhere. Now, the downside of this is that it is limited to 120 hours, which I've only had a few students hit up against, and you can actually upgrade your account on GitHub to be a verified educational user, and therefore you get 160. Okay. Now, local is doesn't have any of those restrictions as far as time because you're running everything locally. The benefit of this is, of course, that concept is I don't have to think about that. So the downside may be if you're somebody that in the course of your day, you're at different locations, this would only be accessible to you if you did it at those stations, which I don't generally recommend because it can get a little confusing. Because ultimately what you're going to do is code in wherever location, cloud or local, and then you'll push to GitHub. You'll learn all this stuff in the next one. Okay, so before I move on to the actual, actually talk about this one, but before we move on to that, I just want to show you by leaving this for a second so that we can see it, the next item, which is the one you'll see here. So in the setup of the development environment, okay, what I do is and this is a rather long page of content, so when you first look at it, it can be overwhelming. But let me just give you, right, the uh, overview of how this works. So I've set these so that if whichever option you've chosen, you have to do this step, which is you have to actually create the repositories out on our GitHub organization. Don't get confused and set these up in your own GitHub because that won't work and you'll have to redo it. So now what you do is if you are using local, then you would follow these steps. Now, when I say these steps, it's basically just links into this content. Ooh, I gotta fix that one. It looks like it didn't. Oh, that one did. So all these links are doing, these are called anchor links, and they're just moving you into the content below to help you get organized about what you need to do. So if you're doing local setup, you'll install VS Code and Git. You'll clone the repos because you've already created them here. You'll configure Git, and then you'll learn the workflow. Okay. Now, if you're somebody who's doing code space, you don't have to do these. You just come here, you create the code space, you learn the GitHub workflow. Okay. So even though these two have the same, actually, I think they're the same. I think I actually ended up doing them the same. Yeah, I did. Because it's the same basic process no matter which option you choose as far as where you install or set up your development environments. Now, the last step here is actually I go through and I have a video specific about how do you submit this particular assignment because there's something you'll get used to which is called your commit history URL. And you're going to set up a public a URL for your pages. So there'll actually be two things that you'll submit here. And in this video, I'll walk you through that. Okay. So when you're doing this assignment, right, you start the assignment like you would any other once you're all the way through the setup. Okay. So I just want to give you that overview about that. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to student view just so we can see it here. Now, so here we're still in attendance. So now I've gone over, right, the choose your choose your weapons, probably I guess it's trying to be funny, your development environment. Okay, that's what we just went over. So the last item for this week is actually who's in the house, and the thing I do here is I do a pretty quick setup of showing you how to set up an index file, how to set up a CSS file, how to connect your JavaScript file. And in there, a couple of students last semester, their comment was, I wanted more information. So one of the things I definitely feel Gen AI is great for is actually answering some of your common questions, not common questions, but the questions you may come up against. So in this case, when you are doing this one, and I believe, and I actually could have left us in, matter of fact, let me just actually do that. Let me see if I can just change over to regular mode here. And the reason I'm doing this is so I can actually show you this who's in the house. This also, and by the way, this is due Thursday night, so I definitely recommend doing the development environment because you can't do this item until you've done that one. Okay, so when you're doing this, you're going to have a file that I give you the instructions. Now, by the way, this is all in the video. The thing I want to say here is, like in this case, when students were commenting on the content covered, because I covered a bit in a fairly short amount of time, is how well then you understand it. You might change this to, go out and do some research and see if you can answer your own question that you might have had about that, and then you could post a question and what you found as the answer. So just a heads up there, just because I want to give you that best experience for that first item, and that all of this is fundamental to you moving forward. Okay, so now let's actually talk about how do you get the points for this item. So in your reply, okay, so when you're setting this up and you hit reply here, right, you're going to have three distinct parts, right? Your setup strategy. So tell us which development environment option you choose, local or cloud. I talked about that. Now talk about why you selected it, okay? So, and then who are you? Why are you taking this course? Please mention your degree or your goal, your pathway, your career pathway, right? What was the reason you're taking this particular course? Now, in this case, you could actually label these with headings, right? So that's one of the things. Since we're going to learn a little bit of HTML, it never hurts, right? So you could do like, what's the first one? Setup strategy. So my setup, I could do my setup. And then I could do, like, just to make your post look a little nicer, never hurts. Like I could do a heading 4. I could also do a heading 3. Right, now when you learn HTML and CSS formally, because actually we do have a class on that, you learn about when to use these, but for our purposes here, it's not a big deal. But it is kind of fun to know that basically this comes down to markup. I'm sorry, this comes down, to markup, not markdown. Markdown something we learn in this class. So this is something, looking at code, you can get familiar with, and this will just toggle back and forth. Okay, now I'm not going to absolutely require this, but I just think it makes your post a little nicer. Okay, and then introduce yourself, like who's in the house? It's me. I don't care. Now the last thing is actually something I hope is a little more fun. Now you can also see how the points are broken down here. So we're going to test how precise we need to be when giving instruction, just like we do in code. Okay, so now what I want you to do is copy this prompt. So I've provided you a prompt. And you can see, and you can use whichever tool you want, Chat, Gemini, Claude, whatever, Copilot, I don't care. It'll actually be kind of interesting to see different experiences of folks who use different tools. Now, I have mentioned I use Gemini primarily. I find it for my needs to be the best. Okay, so act as a little robot, and I am giving you instructions. So when you say act as a literal robot, you're telling the Gen AI tool, you act as a robot. I'm giving you instruction, meaning you follow them exactly. If I miss a step, like taking the lid off, tell me the task failed. And it says visualize the result. I'm not sure that will work out well depending on which Gen AI tool you have. So it might be interesting to see how that translates. Okay, and then I will provide detailed step-by-step instruction for making a PBJ, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, so that's the prompt. So you just take this, right here, copy it in, right, to your whatever. For me, it'd be here, right? Okay. And then I would interact, right? So it'll read the prompt and it'll respond back. And again, this could be different based on whichever tool you're using. Now mine's taking a second here, which is pretty cool, right? There we go. I ended up getting sectors so that when I actually, when it found something, it told me the sector, so then I would move back. It was kind of fun. Let's see, going here. Let me close this one. Okay. So try to guide the robot to make a sandwich. And so there's like this is guiding you through what you want to do here. So in your post, you don't give us all the output. If you wanted to, I think you could share. Let's see, I think it's here where in Gemini I could share it. Yeah, I think they moved it recently. Anyway, I know there's a way on all these sessions you could what is called a chat session from you doing it you could share, but I don't. The idea here is not to share all your content. It's like how many steps did you give it? Aim for around 10 to 20. Did you succeed or did you end up with peanut butter on the outside of the jar? Right. So this is again the idea of the more precise we are, the better result we're going to get. Okay, so that could be now another heading, right? My PBJ robot experience experiment experience. All right, so then for 10 points, this is 50, reply to at least one classmate with a substantive comment, right? So don't just do nice post, doesn't count, right? Ask a question or share a thought. So that's what you need to do here to get all of this done. Now, once you hit reply, even though you have to do a reply to somebody else's, the next item will open up, which is nice. And then you could go ahead while you're waiting possibly for folks to post to do that. Okay, so that's what you need to do to get through your first attendance. Reach out for help if you have any questions. Consider using the Discord. Remember that starting in week 2, tutorial services will be available, but the sooner you reach out for help, the better. All right, talk to you later. Bye.